So welcome everybody to my half. I'm going to be talking about JWatch survey protocol. And as we like to say over and over again, because it stresses how important your volunteerism and our work and our partners' work is that the Florida scrub jay is found nowhere else in the world. So I'm going to try to advance, and it's not advancing.
Are you trying the space bar?
No, an arrow. There we go. All right. So things have evolved during our JWatch life here at Audubon. We used to do 9 trainings around the state. But COVID actually brought on the new age of JWatch training. So now we are doing 2 online trainings this year on the 13th today and the 17th, and 2 in-person trainings. So we kind of have a hybrid going this year. The first in-person training is going to be in Marion County, and we still have maybe a space or 2 left, but it's quite full. So if you're interested in doing an in-person training, you want to let me know ASAP. We do have some space at the Volusia County training, which is at Lyonia. And I saw Jen Cherry, you were talking about what a great place Lyonia is. And indeed it is. And there are a lot of scrub jays there, and you'll have a chance to get out and see them there. The surveys will be completed between the middle of June and, well, the middle of July plus a few days. Data analysis happens after that, between July and December, and that is Audrey's time to really take a look at all the good data that's come in from the field. And then in the fall, we always have a volunteer celebration, and it's a really fun time to get together as a community and celebrate the work that we do. And at this point, we've scheduled it tentatively for Jonathan Dickinson State Park, and it will be on November 5th. So mark your calendars. And then the JWatch report is actually put together. It's kind of an overview of some of the things that we've done over the year, and that comes out in the early fall. So what are we doing today? Well, we're going to talk just a little bit about the program foundation and the scope, why JWatch is so important. We'll go over survey protocol, practice a little bit of ID on the adults and the juveniles, as Audrey had mentioned. We'll look at identifying bands and how we record the bands that we see in the places where the birds are banded. And we have a few quiz slides just for fun. And then we'll talk about what next steps are. Now, so you know, this is being recorded, and we will have a YouTube available. So you will be able to go back and have a look at any parts that you might want to review. We also have a training manual that we used to use for a lot of our in-person trainings, and you will receive an electronic copy of that. Mind you, it is a couple of years old, but it has a lot of the good information that you will need and examples of this survey protocol. So Audubon has managed JWatch, this community science program, for 10 years now, but JWatch is older than that. It was developed by Archibald Biological Station staff and folks at the Nature Conservancy in 2002. And it was designed in a way to keep it quite simple, but also to make sure that everybody was doing things exactly the same way. So the Nature Conservancy managed the JWatch program for, 8 years. Their capacity shifted a little bit. So the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission took that over for a year, made the transition to Audubon, and Audubon now, this past year, we actually celebrated our 10th year. You may have seen it in the news. So We talked a little bit about partnerships, but I want to really stress the benefits on both sides. First of all, Audubon cares about the birds, we care about Jaywatch, we care about the trends, and it's difficult for us to get into a lot of places where you might find scrub jays, particularly public lands. And I want to stress that most of the Jaywatch, actually 99.9% of the Jaywatch sites are on public lands. So all of these owners and managers of public lands are absolutely critical. These are the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, the water management districts. We work with just about all the water management districts, some of the counties, some private organizations, but you can see here, this is just a small sample of the different partners that we work with. Now, the benefit to them is some of them are required and some of them have this in their management plans, and they don't have the capacity to get out and do the surveys to the extent that they want. So it really is a benefit for both Audubon and Jaywatch and all of our partners. So these are some of the areas where we do Jaywatch. I will say again, this is a little outdated because unfortunately we have lost our scrub jays in Levy County. And I think we probably have lost most of the scrub jays in Palm Beach County again. Oh, we're still keeping our fingers crossed. So 45 sites, we are not necessarily, Jaywatch is not necessarily at all of them, but our partners are doing the Jaywatch protocol, and we are all working together on processing the results. So how does Jaywatch benefit the Florida scrub jay? Well, as I mentioned, we use very consistent methods around the state. So it's apples to apples as you're looking at populations. It evaluates the past management. So if somebody has burned, how well have they burned? How quickly do the oaks come back to provide the habitat for the scrub jays? So how does it look based on past management? And then how does it look going forward? Because if we're losing our birds, then we need to do something about it. It also grows awareness of the Florida scrub jay habitat and the unique wildlife that it supports. And what's important about that is if we are going to burn, people need to understand why. And we want them to be supportive in the attempts to do management. Another challenge is sometimes we all love the shade of big tall trees. And when we have a particular area where we have to remove some of the tall trees for the jays, it's important for people to understand why. It's also educational. We educate all ages, and I will talk a little bit more about that later on. And then it grows informed advocates, and we will also show an example of that. So a couple more items about the Florida's scrub jay surveys. We only count total numbers of adults and juveniles that you see at one time. And the reason that I say this, which is so critical, is because counting those juveniles, it is what indicates the sustainability and the health of the population. You may see a Florida scrub jay may live for 17 years, but if it's not reproducing, then that population is not sustainable. So understand that we're out to do the adults, but really in particular, we're celebrating the juveniles. Volunteers are encouraged to survey 3 days in a row, and that's because the survey window is 3 days in a row, and I'll explain that a little bit later. So if you're going to sign up, do your best to commit to 3 days. That doesn't mean that you can't do a day or two, but you're going to get the greatest value, and the program is going to get the greatest value if you can do the 3 days. Understand that as a new jay watcher, you're not going out there on your own, so don't worry about that. You're going to have lots and lots of opportunity to learn. And in fact, the best possible learning scenario is in the field. It's not here on a Zoom meeting. So I encourage everybody to try and get out and do a survey. And also understand that even though we are surveying at the hottest point of the year, which we will talk about, in most cases, you will be riding in a four-wheel drive vehicle, many of them air conditioned, or a UTV, so you have natural air conditioning, and you won't be doing a lot of walking in the scrub, but you will be doing some. Also understand that we start early, so we can finish early, just like the birds. We want to chill out when it gets too hot later in the day. So you will, most of the time, you'll be done by 11 o'clock by noon at the latest. Okay, so what do we do? What do we do? Survey protocol. So as I mentioned, 3 consecutive morning surveys. We start at sunrise, 7:30, some people even earlier. As soon as daylight, we want to get out there in the field. Each site has either one survey route or a number of survey routes. A survey route typically has 12 to 15 survey points, and those are points that are done year after year after year. So they are marked with pink flagging. Your team leader knows exactly where to go. You will go stop at those points and do your survey protocol. So here we have getting ready for, we're looking at the maps. People are getting the maps. They're getting their assignments, and soon they will be on their way out into the scrub. So this is the paperwork, and this is the most important thing, because this is what is going to tell Audrey what you see in the field. So if we look at just the top part, not the red box yet, but the top part, oftentimes you'll have multiple pages. So you want to make sure that you fill out the complete amount of information on each one of the pages. So each team will have a playback unit and a clipboard with this form on it. The clipboard has data sheets and also a map. So you're going to relate the information that you write down to a map. And please get somebody who can write. Actually, one of the site managers requests that his team leaders go home and type up the information, so it's very clear. If you can write clearly, that's really not required, but do make sure that what you're writing down is clear. There will likely be multiple pages, so I always fill out the page 1 of X later on. The overall start time is when you guys all meet as a group, and the overall end time is when you've completed the surveys and you're getting ready to go to lunch. And the reason that we clock those times is because we clock volunteer hours. That's really important for some of our funders, and that's our way of keeping track. The site name and the transect will be provided by the land manager or your team leader. And the weather descriptions, they're all described on the back side of the page of the data sheet. So you'll be able to, again, do those according to protocol. You want to make sure that you bring things to take care of yourself personally when you're in the scrub, because when you go out, you're going out for a couple hours. So you want to bring water, sunscreen. Typically, we don't have a problem with bugs, but if you want to bring bug dope, you're welcome to do that. I always suggest that people wear long sleeves, even though it's hot, to protect from the sun. Definitely want to wear long pants and wear footwear that's appropriate for walking in sugar sand. You're not going to be walking a lot, but you may be walking around the survey points. So make sure that you have closed shoes and you're comfortable walking in the sand. You want to bring binoculars, of course, because the closer you get, the better looks you have at the bands and that type of thing. And a lot of people like to bring cameras, and cameras are very helpful because when you do have bands, sometimes you can't get close enough, or sometimes you don't even see a band until you take a photograph, put it on the computer, blow it up, and that can be very helpful. So again, you'll be traveling by vehicle most of the time. expect to walk, do a little bit of walking. That's important. So back to our survey sheet, and here is the red, the area outlined in red, and this is really the nuts and bolts of what we're doing here. So on the left, you see it says survey point. So as I mentioned, each route will have 12, 15, maybe sometimes up to 20 different survey points. Each one of those is marked with a flag and has a number, and that will relate to a number that you have on your map. So you're going to get to the survey point, you're going to enter your start time, and before you do that, you're going to check for predators. You're going to eventually, when the birds show up at a particular site, you're going to record the number of adults, juveniles, unknowns, record band colors if you can, do a map reference ID, and then fill in the comments. So let's go into each one of those in a little bit more depth. So you arrive at your survey point, and number one thing, and this is just so common, you get so excited about getting there and wanting to see scrub jays that it is really easy to forget to look for predators. And you don't want to necessarily just look for predators overhead. This was a great horned owl that was actually out in the daylight. That was an unusual situation, but that is one of the key predators for the Florida scrub jay. So he's sitting right there. So if you got to this point, you would probably just move on. But the serious predators are these guys. So strangely, that beautiful swallowtail kite can pick a bird right out of the air. And they're very, very good hunters. The Cooper's hawk, and that's the one, you know, I remember showing this in a group of scrub jay volunteers, and everybody just sort of gasped, because that's really the bird that provides the biggest, not provides, but creates the biggest threat. And one of the reasons that the scrub jays don't do so well when the scrub grows up, because we know that Cooper's hawks are amazing forest birds, the way they can maneuver. And this is really a problem for our Florida scrub jay. And then, as mentioned in the last slide, we have our great horned owl. Now, there was some mention of the red-shouldered hawk, and there have been incidences of the red-shouldered hawk taking a scrub jay nestling. But I have also seen scrub jays sitting in the same tree next to a red-shouldered hawk. So that is a sometimes predator, not quite as serious as some of these. But if you were to see one, I would say still you want to pass. When in doubt, be safe. So you're at your survey point. You're ready to go. Everybody's got their clipboards and their binoculars and a big smile. They're ready to see some scrub jays. So what do? Well, each team has a playback unit, and that little playback unit has recorded sounds of the Florida scrub jay. And in fact, they're quite aggressive calls. So because we know that the scrub jay is so territorial, when they hear that sound, they're going to come to find out who the heck is trying to invade their territory. So we play the recording, the playback, for 1 minute, 15 seconds in each one of the directions, and then quiet. Now, if no jays respond, we're going to sit and listen, look around for 2 minutes, and then we're going to play it again. Still no birds? We'll wait another 2 minutes. We'll play it again, and then wait another 2 minutes. So essentially, you're spending a minimal of 10 minutes at each one of the survey points. Now, keep in mind that the scrub jays could come in from any one direction. And one of the common things that I see is you have the leader looking in one direction and everybody turns and looks in the same direction. So it's important to remind one another to look all the way around to make sure that that bird is not sneaking up behind you. And I can tell you some of these veteran volunteers, I guarantee you would say that they've had birds pop up behind them that they didn't even realize they were there. So important to look in every single direction. So if the jays respond, what do? Well, what did we want to do? We wanted to look for adults and we wanted to look for juveniles. Now, what's interesting is if you look at this picture in the middle of the scrub jays, and I didn't even realize this until Jim Rogers, whose photograph this is, mentioned that there are actually 3 birds here. So we had 2 birds that you will find out later are adults. And then in here, we had another bird hiding. And I would pretty much say that that bird is an unknown. We don't know if it's an adult or a juvenile. So after all the activity has passed and the birds have either moved or gotten bored with you, or it's time for you to move on, you want to check with your team to see if you agree on the number of birds that were there. And the reason I say that is because it's important to get a snapshot, not of the birds moving around, but of how many birds you see at one time. And that's why it's helpful to have one person keeping an eye on this bird over here, another person keeping an eye on that bird over there, and you need to communicate with one another so that you're not double counting. Now, the other thing is, it's very easy when these birds are far away. And although we're enjoying a lot of close-ups here, when these birds are far away, sometimes you can be fooled. If you look on the left-hand side in column A, we have a scrub jay. If you look at column B, each one of those is a mockingbird. And column C is a loggerhead shrike. So how do you tell the difference in the distance? Well, you start getting a little bit more familiar with their postures and their profiles. So the Florida scrub jay very often typically holds its tail down, especially when you have the sentinel, which is sitting up high, keeping an eye on things. The mockingbird tends to cock that tail up a little bit more. And this is not 100%, but it'll gives you kind of a reference point. And then for the loggerhead shrike, his head and his body has a totally different profile. Short bill, not much of a neck, kind of a stocky bird. So learning the profiles of a few of these birds is really helpful. So don't be fooled. But the fun thing is that being out in the scrub, even if you don't know birds, you may learn a few new birds. These are a few birds that hang out in the scrub on a regular basis, so you will be able to enjoy them as well as in addition to learning about their profiles, behavior, and how to identify the Florida scrub jay. So June 15th through July 15th is the survey window. Why is that? Well, as Audrey told us, when the baby birds get out of the nest, we don't want to bother them for a while because they're a little wobbly on the branches. They also don't have the same beautiful colors that the adult scrub jays have. So you can see here, the adult scrub jay has a beautiful, beautiful blue head that cuts off right at the neck and then has that nice silver patch on the back. And you don't see any brown on this bird at all. If you look at the juveniles, they really look pretty different. So the bird on the left has something interesting. He has some pink lips right at the base of his, base of his bill. And this is what they call a gape. And this is what signals the adult bird where they should put the food. So most baby birds will have a gape like that. So if you see that, you pretty much know it's a juvenile. They also have a very brown head. The brown head, brown neck, and that brown goes right down into their back. So they don't have that beautiful deep blue and silver coloring. Also notice that especially the one on the right looks pretty scrawny. So they haven't really filled out yet. It's kind of like an awkward teenager. So just seeing that profile is helpful because oftentimes these birds are not going to be in very good light. Now, there's another interesting feature. People ask, how do you tell the difference between a male and a female? Well, under normal circumstances, we can't tell the difference. They can because they have special ability to view the light, the ultraviolet light. However, there is one behavior, and this may be a little jerky, but I'm going to try it anywhere. There's one behavior that will guarantee that this bird is a, oops. Excuse me. Let's see if we can do that again. That this is indeed a female. The female makes a hicking sound, and when she does that, you know, absolutely know that it's a female. So that is another thing that you can go ahead and enter on your data sheet. So bands. Are all scrub jays banded? Boy, don't we wish they were. So it makes it much easier to identify them and figure out their family groups. But in most cases, you will not be running across a lot of banded birds. But if you have the opportunity to come to the Cross Florida Greenway Triangle, just about all of their birds are banded this year. So it's important to be able to identify how that works. Unfortunately, all those brightly colored bands do fade with the sun. So sometimes you have to use your imagination, but it is possible to figure it out because most of the land managers actually have a list of the banded birds. So if you have one band color off a little bit, it's not the end of the world. So how do we do that? What do we do? Well, again, the standard protocol is right leg, top to bottom, and left leg, top to bottom. And you will use an initial for each one of the colors. So the right leg, see that's a faded red. The right leg would be an R, and then between the two legs, you put a hyphen, and the left leg would be S over L, silver over light green. Okay, let's look at another one. So we've talked about the adults versus the juveniles versus the unknowns. Now we're getting into our comment section. So what's really important is what we're trying to do is determine what the family range is. And it's almost like a connect the dots. So what you want to note is the first place that you see your first scrub jay. Where does it pop up in relation to your survey point? If it flies towards you, you want to know that it's flying towards you. If it's flying away, which direction does it go? What kind of behavior? Is it alarmed? Is it look like it's getting ready to feed young? Are there territorial disputes? And these are all things that you will see in the field. And that's why it's so important for you to be able to get out and get that experience. Next slide, please. Okay, so I did mention that there was a comment area and then there was a map attached. So we're gonna go along our route here a little bit. This is a sample route. So we get out first thing in the morning. We stop at number 1. We look for predators. We write down the time. There's no predators. We write down the time and we play our playback. Nothing happens. We play it again. Nothing happens. Again, we wait our 2 minutes and we play it again. And you'd be surprised sometimes how the birds don't show up until that 3rd playback. But in this particular case, nobody shows up. So we move on to number 2. Get to number 2. What do? We look for predators. We write down the time that we get started. We play our playback and bingo, we get a scrub jay pop up. Oh, everybody's so excited and so flustered, but we need to pay attention to where we first saw that bird. And where does that point fall in relation to your survey point? So if in this case, if we had a scale, this is probably about 20 yards south of the actual survey point. And that's where you want to put A, which is the first family that you see, A. And each family group that you see gets a letter, not every individual, but each family group. In this case, we got an A. They hung around for a couple of seconds and then they flew south. So they disappeared and we put in an arrow that they flew away. So we spent our 10 minutes there. We go on to number 3, same thing as number 1, nothing happened. We get to number 4 and bingo, we get another family. And this is family B. So family B, where did they pop up? We saw them a little bit to the west of our survey point. We're going to make a note of how far. Gee, they flew over to us, then they went back over kind of where they came from, but a little further south. Then they moved over back to the east. Now, there were 4 birds there and they were back and forth and back and forth. I didn't put down every single time they moved back and forth, but basically I'm outlining their general movement. So we move on. We don't see any on 5. On 6, we see the 3rd family, family C. And when you're writing out your comments, you're also going to be putting those letters. That's the map ID. So that's how we relate the comments to what we're actually seeing on the map. And then we move to family 8, family 9, survey point 8, survey point 9, survey point 10, and we finish up our route. So now you can see the territories, at least the nesting territories for these particular groups, these particular families. However, something interesting shows up. When we went from point 9 to point 10, we weren't sure if those are the same birds or not. So on day number 2, we want to go back and check and do the same thing that we did on day number 1. But we want to see if the birds from point 9 follow us to 10. And the reason is if we saw 2 juveniles on point 9 and 2 juveniles on point 10, and we counted them as 2 separate families, we're talking 4 juveniles. When in fact, if they were just following us, we only had 2. So we want to make sure we don't overcount. And that's why we do this 3 days in a row. Then ultimately, this information goes to Audrey, and Audrey will make pretty pictures like this, and the little yellow marks will show where those birds actually showed up. Okay, so we went through a lot of the dry stuff. Let's have a little fun. Let's do a little practice. So if you want, you can just pat yourself on the shoulder when you write, or you can put it in the chat, whatever makes you participate, have more fun. But we'll start easy and get a little bit more difficult here. Who can tell me, or who knows what this is, adult or juvenile? And if you said adult, you're right. Okay, now we have 2. Do we have 2 adults, 2 juveniles, an adult and a juvenile. What do we have here? So give you a minute. Look for those markings we talked about. And there's a reason that we call those juveniles brown heads. So if you said the one on the left is an adult and the one on the right is a juvenile, you were right. Good job. Uh-oh, now we're getting in. It's getting a little more challenging here. So again, remember what we talked about. We talked about the fact that as the adults get larger, they kind of fill out, get a little chunkier. We talked about gapes. We talked about beautiful silver patches on the back. So if you said that we have 2 juveniles and 2 adults, you were right. All right. So what do we have here? Again, we talked about gapes. We talked about coloration and just kind of overall demeanor. So if you guessed 2 juveniles, you got it. Okay. Well, these guys really aren't hiding in the scrub. They all look like they want to be sentinels. What are they? So each one should have some type of characteristic that will help you identify what they are. This is a photograph that Brenda loaned us. Hi, Brenda, I saw you on the call. And if you guessed 3 juveniles, you were correct. Okay, and for the bonus question. Now, this is more typically how you're going to see the birds. And in fact, this is still fairly close. So it gets really challenging when you see them from a distance. And this is why I'm grateful that there's this column on the sheet that says unknown. So have you figured it out? Okay, here we go. We had 3 juveniles and 2 adults. Great. Okay, I know you all got 100%. Congratulations. Okay, so just a quick review. We had the birds and the banding. How do you identify the bands? It's right leg top to bottom, left leg top to bottom. Now remember, this is the bird's right leg, which happens to be on our left side. So oftentimes your team leader will have some of the color bands on a chart with them, but do your best guess. So we have lavender over lime green, and we have silver over white. And the way you write these down, again, you have the 2 initials of the color on one leg, and then a hyphen, and then the 2 initials of the color on the other leg. The other thing is that sometimes you can't see all the bands, and that's why your photographers are very handy. If they can take a couple of shots, sometimes even taking a video, because the birds will move quickly and you may not see that until the bird moves. So here's a little practice. Again, the right leg, top over bottom, and the left leg, top over bottom. So if you said white over black dash orange over silver, you were correct. Okay, I think this may be the last one. Sometimes the colors look very similar. Again, remember that ultimately the land managers should have lists of the bands. So on the right, top to bottom, and on the left, top to bottom. So we have red over blue and orange over silver. All right. Oh, one more. Okay. Now, what's interesting here is this bird is undergoing a molt. So indeed, this is an adult, but he looks a little scraggly. So just keep that in mind. So again, on the right, top to bottom, and left, top to bottom. So you have, and I believe this is a faded dark green over white, and the lavender over silver. And again, you know, I have to refresh my memory every year on exactly what the initials are, but you will have those with you. All right. So we talked about the importance of the surveys in the field. Another component is it's really important for us to be educating people about the Florida scrub jay. And because we had 2 years where we didn't spend a lot of time in the field, we decided to create an Audubon Adventures. And this Audubon Adventures is a program that National Audubon has done for years and years, which is actually designed for 3rd to 5th grade. But what we found is the information in these little foldouts are just, it is appropriate for people of all ages. It's a fabulous publication. And it's something that we have offered to state parks, to nonprofits, to Audubon chapters, to individual teachers. So it's a really wonderful resource. And then we finish up with advocacy. And this is one of the examples that really was quite significant. A number of years ago, they were building a gas pipeline, and the gas pipeline was going to go right through the middle of Halpata-Tassanaki Preserve. And Marion County and Citrus County Audubon Jay Watch volunteers got together and actually wrote a letter. Audubon also contributed, got meetings, and actually got the pipeline relocated away from the preserve. And it was because they had information like this identifying where those families were. So we have some more potential advocacy issues coming up that you will hear more about now that you're on our scrub jay list. And this is all really, really significant and very powerful. So what are the next steps? You've gone through the training. I hope you will get out in the field. And in order to do this, you'll be receiving a copy of the training schedule, the training schedule and the survey schedule by county. And at that point, depending on where you are, you will contact the person listed, the land manager listed for that site. And I really do encourage you to participate in more than one survey. Every single place that I have gone to see scrub jays is totally different. The birds behave differently based on whether they're near people, whether they're used to people, whether they're remote. And it really is an eye-opener, not only for those birds, but also just the habitat around Florida. So if you have enjoyed some of the photos that we have here, you may want to join our Facebook group. All you have to do if you're a Facebook user is put in Audubon Jay Watch, and people post the most amazing, beautiful photographs. So you can really enjoy the Florida scrub jays even when you're not out in the field. And then the Audubon Florida website has a list of YouTube videos and past annual reports and all kinds of good information for you to share and ways to stay in touch. And I imagine this YouTube will also be posted there in case you are interested in watching it again. So I want to thank you for your time. We hope that you'll join the Jay Watch community. And if I haven't covered everything like Audrey did, we have time for a few questions.
First one, Jacqui, is when you see a predator, where do you write it on the data form?
There is a column for predators. So all you have to do is say predator and put it in there. Put it in where it says predators. And if there are no predators, you write 0 or no or not NA. So, but it's very clear on the form. And, you know, in the comments section, you have lots and lots of space. You don't just have to put everything in that tiny little box. So you can write, you know, saw short-tailed hawk or whatever it is that you saw. You don't need to put in that you saw some, you know, pretty tar flower and, you know, some towies, but definitely put in the relevant information. So.
Can you reiterate what the female does, you know, talking about the hiccuping?
Yes, she throws her head back and she hicks, and I wish I could get that to play, but I'm sorry I didn't. And it's really distinctive, and some people can do it really well. And in fact, we should probably have a hicking contest at one of our reunions one year. But it really sounds like hiccups. Anybody want to volunteer? Doug, can you hiccup? No? Brenda? Anyway.
If there are 5 scrub jays in one place, are they considered a family?
Chances are they are a family, because if not, they'd be chasing each other away. And as Audrey described, the families also oftentimes are mom and dad and the kids from the next year, and, you know, a couple of hangers on. You can have a family as large as 8 scrub jays. However, I also mentioned that depending on where you are, the birds do behave a little differently. And I have seen in Ocala National Forest, sometimes the juveniles will get together from different families and all hang out together. It's like the kids are partying, you know? So it's each site is different, personalities, behaviors are different, and you will learn by what you see and what you observe.
Will the contact list come to our email?
Yes. Yep. And I pretty much have that figured out. I'm still waiting for a few dates. Some of the land managers are a little hesitant to commit to particular dates this far in advance. But if you get in touch with them, then they will tell you if they need people, when they need people, and you can coordinate. And sometimes if they're really depending on the volunteers, they will actually set the dates that work for you. So.
Any other questions?
You know, there's so many questions once you get out in the field, but it's just a really, really exciting program. And I think it was Archibald, they put together a wonderful little graph one time, you know, that the science people, they have all the different axes and whatever. And they show that the more time that you spend with the Florida scrub jay, the bigger the smile and the little smiley face gets. And I just love that. I think one year I'm going to have to put that on a t-shirt. So.
Yeah. That's adorable, Jacqui.
Yeah. So.
Well, thank you for the great presentation.
Well, good. You know, that stuff's a little dry. It'll make a lot more sense when you actually get out there and you get to practice. And I'm really looking forward to seeing some of you that I haven't seen in a few years, Jay and Doug and Brenda, and I'm sure there are other folks in here. I'm seeing names and not necessarily faces. So please try and join us. And if you can't find one that works for you, you know, come think about taking a little holiday and spending a weekend. Some people do that in a place in Florida where maybe you haven't been before. So
Jacqui, so sorry to interrupt. Jim Rogers was just wondering if there are still Audubon Adventures brochure copies that they can get.
Yes, would that be for Venice Audubon, Jim?
Yes, yes, it would be.
Okay, I did send them a whole bunch, so you might want to check and see if they have them, but I do have some here. So would you just maybe check with Jack and let me know?
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah. All right. Well, good to see y'all.
I look
I forgot-
forward to meeting some of you in the field, and thanks for joining us tonight.
See you later. Bye-bye.